I would put Norman Wybury as one of my favorite Old Testament scholars. Again, not a conservative evangelical scholar, but a very thoughtful. He wrote a book called The Methodological Study of the Development of the Pentateuch, or it's more properly, The Making of the Pentateuch, a Methodological Study. It's just very clear. It's very large, but it's very clear. It makes sense. At least you can read it and appreciate his thought and his scholarship. And I'm going to summarize here just what are some of these summary points that he makes. He points out, first of all, that the documentary hypothesis cannot adequately account for the law codes in the Pentateuch. The documentary hypothesis cannot adequately account for how these law codes exist in multiple places, why they're reproduced from one place to the next. If the law code was established, for instance, in Exodus, why would it need to be reproduced at all in Deuteronomy or in Leviticus? Why didn't that later source just update and revise the prior source that he already had? There's no effort to try to explain why we have two law codes, except for one is given to the first generation, one's given to the second generation. But we don't redo the U.S. legal code every time a new generation of Americans is born. I mean, one could argue that we probably should, but we don't just go in and hit the reset button, every 30 years. Why would Israel need to do that if the pre-existent law? Now, this also ignores Deuteronomy 1:5. That Deuteronomy is an exposition of the law, but I guess I've beat that horse to death. Number two, he makes the point that the documentary hypothesis is overly dependent on an evolutionary view of Israel's history. Now, this is a critique directly of Wellhausen and the presupposition that they must have been a primitive society that was animist, and then later they became henotheistic, and then they became monotheistic, and that religions have to develop and cultures have to develop in that kind of way. He argues that the documentary hypothesis creates authors who are too spectacularly consistent and editors who are too prone to oversight or disregard for the tendencies that define authorship.